Martin, you're going to talk to us about very complex issues. I've heard from some of our residents and I struggle to understand, and it's vastly complicated. So it'd be good to hear from you about leasehold and freehold abuses. Thank you.
Certainly. Well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Martin Boyd. I'm Chair of Trustees of a charity called the Leasehold Knowledge Partnership. We also act as the Secretariat for the all-party parliamentary group on leasehold and commonhold reform. I've been around helping people since about 2008, and we've been through a whole series of cycles. We were most heavily involved early on in abuses in the retirement sector. And there have been a number of OFT stroke CMA investigations into that part of the market. There was an investigation initially into the exit fees you pay in retirement homes. And the OFT found that a number of those amounted to unfair trading practices. They also looked into a collusive tendering ring that ran for a number of years in retirement homes on door entry systems. And unfortunately, they reached a market deal with the company that they felt was running a cartel, and in agreement for them supposedly self-reporting, they weren't fined. So even if you run a cartel and you overcharge people living in retirement homes in the leasehold sector, you don't end up having to pay for it. We then have had a number of other problems in the sector over the years that we've helped out on. The leasehold house issue became very prevalent some years ago, where a number of developers felt that they could make some additional money by suddenly making houses leasehold rather than freehold. And that helped create a group called the National Leasehold Campaign, who I think formed in 2017. They now have over 22,000 members, and they help represent individual leaseholders in both flats and houses. And that's now expanded into something else called fleasehold, which was the next scam that the developers thought of. And that's where they sell you your house as a freehold, but your house sits on what's deemed to be a private estate, and you are liable to pay those estate charges. And if you fail to pay them, then your freehold can be taken away from you in just the same way that your leasehold could be taken away if you don't pay service charges for your flat or your leasehold house or your ground rent. That then followed with the cladding scandal, and we've worked very, very closely with the cladding groups and what's now called the End Our Cladding Scandal. The one thing that Giles and Dave forgot to mention is the massively important rally that's coming up in Parliament Square on the 16th of September, which we're jointly running between the NLC, LKP, and the End Our Cladding Scandal group. That will coincide with an APPG that we're running inside Parliament on the same day. So the MPs will go and listen to various issues in Parliament, and then hopefully a number of them will go out to Parliament Square and speak to leaseholders who are either facing the problems in that market or within the cladding specific issues that we've got now. Most of the first sort of 5 to 6 years we were doing our work, everyone was telling us we were wrong. The whole sector said there are no problems with leasehold. It generally works quite well. And that was the message that was coming out from ministers. They felt the law was working properly. that people weren't being ripped off. We were the only ones that were foolish enough to report it. We continue to report abuses across the sector and highlight some of the very bad practices that go on. We were heavily involved with exposing the Taylor Wimpey issues that have now gone on to see them create their ground rent refund model. And we worked closely with the NLC and the CMA on their project, which is now seen Aviva and Persimmon agree to vary their ground rent terms. So across the market, we see a mixture of systemic problems caused by large developers and large freeholders who own the titles to blocks of flats, and specific individual cases. We help individuals who face problems, and we help MPs and councillors in their casework when they've got individual problems. Having spent our 5 or 6 years with everyone telling us we were wrong and that there were no problems in the market, that has now radically changed. It started in 2016 when Sajid Javid was Secretary of State, and he produced a white paper called Fixing Our Broken Housing Market. In there, he did a lot of work looking at the leasehold part of the market, and there were a number of consultations which got the biggest set of responses the housing department had ever had. The sector said, oh, this is just a small group of grumpy leaseholders who aren't representative. Fortunately, the department didn't believe that view, and it went on to instruct the Law Commission to review 3 key areas of the law. Those reports have now been published, and we're awaiting the government response. Those 3 areas were they're looking to change the law on enfranchisement, i.e. how you either extend your lease or buy the freehold to your house, or collectively buy the freehold for your flat. The right to manage legislation, which allows people in blocks of flats to take control of the management away from their third-party freeholder. And also what they've termed the reinvigoration of common hold. So common hold is the form of tenure ownership that exists almost universally in the rest of the world, where the people who live in blocks of flats collectively own the building between them. So we're almost unique in this, in England and Wales, in keeping the system which says when you buy a flat, you are a tenant under the law, and you have a freeholder who owns the building. And that has caused massive confusion during the cladding crisis, because Dame Judith Hackett did not understand the problems that causes. Since she completed her report, she's gone on to say she now does understand the fundamental unfairness that leasehold causes, in that the tenants are under the law and their lease liable for 100% of the costs, but they are not the building owner, and they do not have any control on what works is carried out on their homes. Which is why, we've had, the 3 speakers before me have talked about the huge bills that are arriving. And it's life-changing to people when you get a bill of £50,000 arrive. We have seen huge numbers of people facing mental stress. Some people have gone bankrupt. Some people may have done something far worse. And I think until we find a way to move forward, this problem is not going to go away for years and years to come. So within the sector, we've got a lot of change going on. The abuses that are available to freeholders stem out of the way that the leasehold model is designed. And what happens is that, particularly in flats rather than houses, the developer creates the lease. They write the contract, which you have no option but to sign if you want to buy that flat. That contract sets out how the property will operate and how it will be paid for. And it says you, the tenant, are going to pay for all the costs of maintaining the building. And you're also going to pay a ground rent. A ground rent does not provide you with any service. It's a fee which is nominally for the privilege of you living on someone else's land. The reality is, it is the income stream that has been used to create a lot of the abuses that we have in the sector. Ground rents have gone up dramatically in recent years, and people don't understand it. They think when they're buying a property and the ground rent is £200, £300 or £400 a year, it's not too important because they're only planning to own the property for 7 years and then move on to somewhere else. But the market counts the cumulative income stream that ground rent generates when a valuation is made in terms of you trying to buy that freehold from the landlord or extending the lease at some point in the future. And what the ground rent does as well is it provides the income stream which encourages third-party investors to buy those assets. And why they're buying them is nothing to do with the ground rent. That is a minor part of the income stream that they're looking to generate. What they want is the management of the building. And they want the commissions they can earn out of the insurances. And those insurance commissions can be stupendous. When I first sort of came into this issue, the government had a leasehold advisory service, which is there to supposedly provide impartial advice. And until we stopped it in 2017, they used to run an annual conference for the sector, where some very dodgy tricks were taught to everyone. And the very first meeting I went to in, I think it was 2010, had very prestigious speakers. It had the Master of the Rolls, it had the President of the Property Tribunal, it had various civil servants, and it had an auctioneer who stood up and he told the audience, ground rents are very good investments because you can make 100% markup on the insurance, and under the law, you have no obligation to tell the leaseholders that you're making that money. So it seemed very wrong to me that market existed. It seemed even wronger that a government advisory body was telling people how to run this scam. But that's where we were. The speaker was actually wrong in that you do have some rights to find out about insurance commissions, but it can be very, very hard. But it is one of the biggest abuses that we still have in the sector. So the government's trying to do a couple of things at the moment in addition to the Law Commission project. The most important of those is the ground rent bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment. It had been understood from some time ago that unless ground rents are removed from the market, the incentive for developers to sell leasehold rather than common hold will remain. So the proposal is, with the ground rent bill, that on new build, ground rents will be totally banned. All ground rents will be a peppercorn, i.e. a rent of no monetary value. There is a small exception for retirement homes who will have an extra 2 years before they have to implement this system. But if you're buying a retirement home in a year's time, and or a year after the bill, and you still have a ground rent, then you might ask the developer the question, why am I going to have to pay this when in another year's time the next person coming along won't? That change does not impact where we are with existing ground rents. That's being covered by other legislation which will be brought forward soon. The other massive change we've got going on at the moment is the Building Safety Bill, which has just had its second reading. And Heather was talking about numbers earlier, and if she looks at Hansard, she'll see that the father of the house talks about some of the numbers that we've got in terms of the remediation that's going on. And the figure of 15 billion that's possibly there, and he ends up suggesting that Treasury makes money out of this at the end of the day, particularly with the fact that if we do spend 15 billion, they'll be looking at £3 billion worth of VAT coming into the system. So our view is there are huge problems with the Building Safety Bill. The estimate is it will add nearly £500 million worth of costs on to the market per year. That's in the government's impact assessment. The non-monetized benefit that the consumer gets from this is 300 to 400 million pounds worth of feeling safer, which is rather ridiculous that in a country like ours, we say that we're going to put these costs on people because by doing that, it somehow will make them feel safe in a building that ought to be safe anyway.
Martin,
that's where we are.
Martin, what you've explained is amazing. But I'm going to stop you now, if you don't mind, to just, I've never heard it explained so succinctly and clearly. So I don't know, I'm going to see if, Heather, would you like to come in first with anything, comments or points? If you're here, or Sam?
No, I agree. That was a really helpful, sorry, I'll turn my camera on. That was a really helpful kind of exposition of the issues. Yeah, and I think it's something that we, you know, as a councillor, I'm just starting to get to grips with. But I am aware of the level of concern in lots of the new build communities in Cambridge around it. So thank you very much for explaining it so clearly.
Tumi, would you like to come in and make a comment or ask a question?
Hi, thanks, Katie. Thanks, Martin, for that explanation. I completely hear you and I get it, because I've been in the position where we had freehold sold to another company. We weren't even aware of it. And it was only when one of the flat owners contacted us and said, did you know that this has happened? It's like, whoa, our insurance just doubled overnight. And other costs were being given. I was like, why are we doing this? So we eventually bought the freehold and ended up being, that the common hold that you explained earlier on. So, all the 6 flat owners became the freehold owners of the building. But not everyone can do that. And it is amazing that we in, England and Wales have this system that, frankly, I don't get it and really should be phased out. So I'm completely in support of the plans to phase that out. But the stress that flat owners are under is enormous. And all I can say is, I would be happy to help whichever way it is we can, you know, to help those who we might find in situations like that within our area, South Cambs, and of course, and the city, because we have a shared service. But there we go. That was quite a good explanation. Thank you.
Just to say, one thing that's already come across my desk is a developer who had apparently made representations when selling flats to the purchasers that should they ever decide to sell the freehold, they would offer the flat owners first option on it. And much to their surprise, they discovered that the block had actually been sold on without any of them having been offered the opportunity.
Exactly.
And again, you know, back to this issue of trust. It is completely corrosive for people to feel that their primary asset and their home can be traded as a commodity without them being aware of what's happening and without the promises that were made to them being borne out in fact.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things Harry, I'll move myself. Yeah, one of the things that Harry mentioned earlier was some new codes of practice that are coming out. The one thing that code does not seem to have addressed is there is a unique sort of characteristic of property law. A salesperson for a developer can say whatever they want to you. Mm. If it's not in writing, it doesn't count. It's not like other contract law. So people need to understand, if a developer says, oh, I'm going to offer you, you know, the freehold, if they're not writing that down, it does not matter.
That's what I always recommend people get things in writing. There's no point just being told it. Yep. Proof has to be in written form.
Yeah.
Then you have a contract.
The other thing I've been finding is a huge increase, very poor maintenance of, you know, utilities, and then also huge costs for power, and then huge and rising costs. The residents keep coming back about continued rising costs.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the places I started. We took our landlords to court and eventually got £500,000 back as overcharged services. It is, you know, to defend managing agents though, it is with utilities quite often very difficult to find out what the right bill is from the utility suppliers. They don't seem to be very good at billing people. But it is something to be careful of. You know, one of the other sort of really nasty characteristics of the leasehold world is very often the developer is telling the managing agent that they appoint at the when the building's sold, what they will set the service charges at. So what they will want is a service charge level that makes it easy to sell rather than what the managing agent may know it's going to cost. So you move in and the costs do jump after the first couple of years. And it's not because you know, you are suddenly being overcharged. It's that you were undercharged to make it look as if you ought to be buying the flat.
Okay. Martin, thank you so much. I don't know if any other councillors want to come in, because we're going to, I think, Martin, we could have a whole session a day talking at different aspects, because there are so many. I think we're going to.
Yeah, can I just say, well done you for standing up and standing up for the fight, and out in Taylor Wimpey. They couldn't have liked it.
Thank you.
Well done, and thank you very much.